They were about the same height and size, but Elsie felt that she could be Mona's mother. This was perhaps due to her many years of taking care of others. She was a nurse's assistant, though no nurse was present on this particular job. She was there to keep Gaspard safe and comfortable, recording vital signs, feeding and grooming him, doing some light housework, and overall keeping him company between his twice-weekly dialysis sessions, until he decided whether or not he would accept his daughter's offer of one of her kidneys. Mona had been approved as a donor, but Gaspard had still not made up his mind. Mona poured the champagne, and Elsie watched her closely as she handed a champagne flute to her father. "À la vie," Mona said, toasting her father. "To life." That afternoon, Blaise called back to tell Elsie that Olivia's mother had heard from the kidnappers. The mother had asked to speak to Olivia, but her captors refused to put her on the phone. "They want 50,000. Blaise spoke in such a rapid, nasal voice that Elsie had to ask him to repeat the figure. "American?" she asked, just to be sure. She imagined him nodding his egg-shaped head up and down as he answered. "Oui. Of course her mother doesn't have it," Blaise said. "These are not rich people. Everyone says we should negotiate. Can maybe get it down to 10? I'm trying to borrow it." She wished he meant $10, which would have made things easier. $10 and her old friend and rival would be free. Her ex-husband would stop calling her at work. But of course, he meant 10,000 American dollars. "Jésus, Marie Joseph," Elsie mumbled a brief prayer under her breath. "I'm sorry," she told Blaise. "This is hell." He sounded too calm now. She wasn't surprised by this. Blaise was always subdued by worry. Weeks after he left the compas band he'd founded and had been the lead singer of, he did nothing but stay home and play his guitar. Then, too, he had been exceedingly calm. Elsie's former friend Olivia could be appealing. Chestnut-colored, with a bushy head of hair that she wore in a gelled bun. Olivia was sort of nice-looking. But what Elsie had first noticed about her was her ambition. Olivia was 2 years younger than Elsie, and a lot more outgoing. She liked to touch people either on the arm, back, or shoulder while talking to them, whether they were patients, doctors, nurses, or other nurses' aides. No one seemed to mind. Her touch quickly became not just anticipated or welcomed, but yearned for. Olivia was one of the most popular certified nurses' assistants at their North Miami agency. Because of her near-perfect mastery of textbook English, she was often assigned the richest and easiest patients. Elsie and Olivia met at a 1-week refresher course for home attendance, and upon completion of the course, they had gravitated toward each other. Whenever possible, they'd asked their agency to assign them the same small group homes, where they cared mostly for bedridden elderly patients. At night, when their wards were well medicated and asleep, they'd stay up and gossip in hushed tones, judging and condemning their patients' children and grandchildren, whose images were framed near bottles of medicine on bedside tables, but whose voices they rarely heard on the phone, and whose faces they hardly ever saw in person. The next morning, Elsie helped Gaspard change out of his pajamas into the gray sweats he wore during the day. Elsie wished he would let her help him attempt to walk around the manicured grounds of his development, or even let her take him for a ride in his wheelchair, but he much preferred to stay at home, in bed. Just as he had every morning for the last few days, he whispered, "Elsie, my flower, I think I'm at the end." Compared with some mornings, when Gaspard would stop to rest even while gargling, he was relatively stable. His face was swelling up, though, blending his features in a way that made his head look like a baby's. "Where's Nana?" he asked, using his nickname for his daughter. Mona was sleeping in her old bedroom, whose walls were covered with posters of no longer popular or long-dead singers and actors. Elsie knew little about her except that she was living in New York, where she worked for